live hard, live deep, live true, love
Yeah.
deeply. And if we can
Yes.
help you discover how to do that and what's holding you back, that's what we're here for. What we've been seeing for the last few years or generation is the healing of the great
Yeah.
wounds of Western civilization, which is the egoic separation from the head and the heart, and from the feeling of connection to the planet and to our place in the web of life.
Rak Razam, welcome to the Kylie Ryan Show. It's time to evolve. It is such a joy to talk with you, Rak. Rak Razam! I always do this in my head when I think about your name. Rak Razam! Is that what you do?
Pretty much. I had a conversation with my 12 and a half year old daughter today about the power of names and naming, and how like a lot of indigenous cultures, it's the vibration it creates and it's with you pretty much your whole life. And it's like NLP. It's intergenerational NLP, whether we realize it or not. Names are vibrational and they're powerful. And so thank you for recognizing that.
I do. It's so fabulous that you say this because literally yesterday I was talking to my other shaman friend that will be on a different episode, Marcosi, and we were also talking about the power of names as magical instructions and identity amplifiers, I guess, transmissions of themselves.
So it keeps me humble, and this is one of the reasons, but it's in the tradition of the Native American. It's like a verb, it's like the sound of running water. It's the sound of nature and kind of encapsulating energetics that indigenous cultures have always been present with in the namings, like running bull or chief sitting water or something like that. But my middle name is roller skate, just to be completely transparent. But it keeps me in flow, which is really a good thing, a flow state. So, and
Rak
it's the
roller
70s.
skate, Rak
Yeah.
roller skate Razam.
Yeah, so it's triple R. Anyway, we're going down a rabbit hole there. What is this? Where am I, Kylie? What's happening here?
You're in my podcast. Dun, 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 dun. Kylie and the Evolutionaries.
Woo!
Woo!
Yeah, it's like a girl band, or it's like a Scooby-Doo type of mystery machine type of thing.
A little bit. It's like a portal to your best life, a portal to your most mystical, fabulous life. And so, of course, you need to be a part of it because you are a portal into magical best life.
Yes, very good, very good. In preparation for this, I did have a look at one of your websites, and I only got to
one,
the front kind of
one of my
byline.
many.
And it was like Kylie Ryan, coach, speaker, teacher, and mystic. So thank you for having me on your show, because they're really juicy words and roles. And I
Yeah.
identify with most of those actually, but there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah.
There is a lot to it. I recognize you in all of those roles and archetypes as well. That's why you're on the show. I just want to talk to fellow people who also love these archetypes and inhabit them from time to time.
There's an old kind of bumper sticker that used to be in my home for many years, and it said like all my friends are shamans or something like that, or something weird. But it's blurred now, and it's all my friends are coaches. Or maybe it's some byproduct of social media where everyone's buying into everyone's feeds and giving unsolicited advice. And then maybe everyone's an expert now, but it's a
Mhm.
collective journey that we're all on. And part of this idea of coaching or being a teacher, it really, for me, comes down to who are you? And on my website, I have this little byline I've said for a while. It's like remembering who and what we really are, right? Because not just who,
Yeah.
because in my mystic leaning with the work I do with psychedelics and shamanism in countries where they're legal, and in commenting on them and supporting people and being on advisory roles, it's culture nurturing. And that happens on an
It is
individual level and it happens on a collective level. But we're all remembering either who and what we really are or who we want to be. And when we get
Mm.
in these micro niches of identifying as being just, say, an entrepreneur or just being a parent or just being whatever, they're all facets. But even those facets are going on a bigger life journey and this collective journey that we're all on. And I keep think that's where my cutting edge is. And that's where, in a
Yeah.
sense, I'm most comfortable. It's like the big picture.
I'm right there with you. I love it. The cutting edge of the
Mm.
diamond facets of consciousness.
Yeah, why not, huh?
Why
Yeah.
not? So, for someone who is new to meeting you for the first time, what would you like them to know about you that has led you to this place? where you're at the cutting edge of multidimensional fields of consciousness in all of these different roles?
I don't want to preface this by saying I'm a little bit intimidated by this idea of fulfilling these roles we just said to people, coach, speaker, teacher, mystic, bit I'm cool with. But it's because there's a vulnerability in sharing yourself. But the reason I think that I'm where I am doing what I do, interfacing with people and nurturing and supporting them to really find this truth, which for me bleeds into a spiritual kind of frequency and language. But it's really about who we are as humans and what we're connected to and how we relate to others and the world. And so to get to that, it's been relentless, right? And you go through your own initiations, your own breakdowns, your own kind of breakthroughs, and it just keeps going. And even right here, right now, if I let the surface level go, if I tune into that peripheral background, I'm aware that I'm in something, right? I'm in an environment, an ecology, and I'm leaning more and more these days to this simulation theory, really. I'm in something, and the thing I'm in is aware that I'm in it, and I'm aware of it being aware of me as well. I don't know. It gets weird.
I love that. I had this interesting experience once when I was doing washing up with my gloves on, doing the washing up. And I had this really visceral sense of playing myself as an avatar in a game. And I was like, oh, this is my consciousness moving my hands, washing the dishes, and just having that like really visceral sense of playing myself, and that this as an avatar and my awareness consciousness playing myself in life. And it's an interesting, obviously there's many traditions that lead to this in various ways, sense of connecting back or leaning back into the witness consciousness more than the day-to-day personality level. And I know you work a lot in helping people access and remember that kind of awareness of awareness.
Well, what I've realized though is there's in the path, the pathless path, which becomes your life, what you're guided to, what you're here for, what your skills are, where your challenges are, where your growth is, the relentlessness of being aware of awareness, right? And then how that contributes back into the whole. But I started out in media, basically, as a freelance journalist, as a writer, as a thinker, as just a completely out there, nerdy, sci-fi, consciousness stretched already by media, black sheep that was really always on the edge. And then there's nowhere to go but further out into past the edges once you start there. But basically, I was, we could draw a line and say I was a freelance journalist and I was working for Australian Penthouse, believe it or not,
Ooh,
in
sexy.
the early, well, yeah, early 2006, 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, around then. But what it enabled me to do is have a more or less mainstream outlet that was willing to talk about psychedelics and consciousness, spirituality and shamanism, and gave me free rein to lend my voice to that. And so what I did is I dived into the Hunter S. Thompson School of Philosophy, and I rebranded this whole idea of gonzo journalism into kind of experiential journalism, which meant you have to be in there on the inside of these experiences to really talk about them. You can't do what CNN did years later with reporting on ayahuasca and sending a reporter off to Peru and saying, and now they're imbibing the drug. And you just don't get it. You've got to plug into the culture, you've got to plug into the medicine, you've got to plug into the language and get beyond your cultural framings, which are all indoctrinated, and there's always an agenda in every culture, right? But to be free, to know who you are, this is where the journey begins. So for me, I went to Albert Hofmann's 100th birthday party. And if you don't know the name Albert Hofmann, he was the Sandoz chemist which invented or discovered LSD in 1938 and let the cat out of the bag in 43. But we're talking about these catalysts for consciousness. So the whole world's media was there, and I was there reporting for Penthouse, and I worked for The Age in Melbourne, and quite a lot of other periodicals. But it was this cultural event which was all about psychedelics, and it had this legitimacy of this 100-year-old man who was live and lucid. He'd been microdosing LSD for decades, and it's anaerobic. It's good for oxygenation. It stops Alzheimer's. People are microdosing now. A lot of things which happened back in 2006 were the epicenter for what has now become what people call the Psychedelic Renaissance, which is part and parcel of kind of the absorption of psychedelics back into the medical model in one way to replace SSRIs, antidepressants, which are not working really in the long run. Anyway, so I reported on this moment, and well, I went in deep on that in the Gonzo style. And then my second assignment was the Shamans of the Amazon. And when I say assignment, I was choosing my own assignments, but it was looking at the role of the mythic archetype of the shaman in the 21st century and what was happening with the rise of ayahuasca tourism in Peru. People don't know ayahuasca is a time-honored sacrament. It's a vegetal medicine that is used all through South America and now the world. It's a national treasure that has been protected by the governments of Peru, at least. And there's been this interface for the last generation or two of Westerners going over to Peru and countries like it to partake not just of their sacred medicines, but the lineage and tradition which connects them to the planet and helps heal and alleviate a lot of mental issues and glitches and PTSDs and depressions and things like this that Western culture breeds en masse. So my career has always been doing things like that, and that kind of morphed into a book and writing about ayahuasca and shamanism. And that turned into a documentary film, both of them called Aya Awakenings. And then that later then parlayed into an ongoing documentary series called Shamans of the Global Village. So I've been really, for the last pretty much 15, 20 years, really working at the front edge of consciousness with indigenous cultures and with Western psychedelic communities. And then for the last few years, really focusing with 5-MeO-DMT, which is both in natural form throughout nature in toad and also a lab-based version. But all of these substances are really front and center now of this discussion around the psychedelic renaissance and the correct use of these substances, not just for healing, but for exploring, I guess, the frontiers of consciousness. It's legitimized, and there's big money in the psychedelic industry now. And so there's a lot of pros and cons and a lot of teething issues, a lot of cultural issues, and that's what I advise on. I'm on a few boards in the States and work with people in a private capacity with coaching with these consciousness containers.
Wow.
End of bio.
End of bio.
So that brings us up to date. So yeah. So
can I just pause for a second?
Journeys,
can I just pause for a second and say, Rak, you are the real deal. You are the real deal in this. That's what I got from that. I'm like, wow. I mean, obviously, I know you're the real deal. But for people that are, because it's in this renaissance and this rebirthing, and there's a lot of people that are very new to the space, and I never want to dismiss or diminish someone who is enthusiastic and at the start of their journey. But what I'm hearing from this bio summary is that you are like well in and mature and have that depth of understanding and gravitas in your lived experience with this for many years. So just wanted to really drive that home. Yeah.
And it's funny because I'm coming back to our original springboard here, coach, speaker, teacher, mystic. In the old days, I used to think, what do they say? Those who can't do, teach. And as I started to accumulate, and my website's rakrazam.com, but there's probably hundreds of hours of free interviews and transcripts and lectures, videos, audio. There's stuff there. But what really developed in this journey of thinking that I was a journalist, and I am, and I was, and thinking I'm an author and thinking I'm whatever, is that it led me deeper and deeper onto this spiritual path. And then you use the word shaman, which most of us shy away from, although I love it because secretly I love superhero. I love all these archetypal kind of mystic wizard. Part of what I learned in my first journey over to Peru is that in the West, we killed our mystics and our medicine people. We killed our witches and our warlocks, our herbalists, all through Europe in the Middle Ages with literally the witch hunts and the Inquisitions and the churches. And we were talking offline the other day, speaking of the churches, of our Irish connection and that lineage and the bloodline. And these things are in our blood. And you could draw upon stuff talking about epigenetics and how stuff's passed down, how trauma's passed down. But you know what I realized really recently is trauma kind of shapes not just us as individuals. We get this legacy and this lineage down the family line, and it's sculpting culture and society and civilization over space-time through us, right?
Yes.
And how we react to it and how we break it eventually if we choose to. But the pain and the heartache of being human, it's overwhelming, and we can be in the head and we can do whatever, but then when we start to feel, and this is what I feel, it's one of the things this is all about, is unifying the heart and the mind and becoming whole human beings, not being good little cookie cutters that fit in the 9 to 5 and fit into these isms. And so a lot of my coaching and corporate stuff and the teaching, it's really about the inner work of the soul and of facing the pain and growing from the pain. They have this new term I only found out about 6 months ago, post-traumatic
Post
stress growth, PTSG, not D, not depression, right?
PTSG.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I say to people
Post-traumatic
is that,
growth.
a lot of what the psychedelic medicines do, and 5-MeO is probably the best at this. I say there's a shorthand. I always think of MASH. Remember MASH, and they'd be in triage in surgery all the time. And I think I
Yes.
picked it up as a kid, but they'd be like, nurse, I need sponge, suction, suture, scalpel, right? There's all these different instruments. And I feel that all the different, predominantly plant and earth medicines, because they have a lineage and they have a connection, and they have, in hippie speak, they have more of a vibrational resonance with us as human beings. It's like genetically modified food. It might look good, or RNA type of experimentation. It might look good on paper, but you don't know until it's in you in a few generations down the track what it's really doing. So the plant and earth medicines, the entheogens, like ayahuasca and Salvia divinorum and the peyote and the cactus and the acacias here in Australia, containing DMT, or in desert toad, they're not just random chemicals. There's built-in safeguards and relationships with them and with nature and with us. In fact, our brain chemistry is designed to slot in and interface with these substances. We have a cannabinoid system, for God's sake. I mean, what does that mean? We have a structure of the brain that is formed in relationship with that sacred substance, right? We have tryptamines, and if people don't know, tryptamines are all through nature. They're in the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, they're in mammals, and they're in us human beings. And they include, well, melatonin or melatonin, skin pigment, light activation, serotonin system. But in its absence in darkness, NN-DMT, which is in the ayahuasca brews and added to the ayahuasca brews alongside the Banisteriopsis carpi vine, 5-MeO DMT, which we talked about in the toad, and it's in other plants and other materials. These revolutionarily transformative substances, which essentially reduce the egoic filter. And part of the kind of problem of modern civilization is we don't know what we're doing. Right? We run out of control. We're like an algae bloom or a fast-running cancer through the earth. And it's because we're up here. And we're up here because we're not connected here. Something happened in our species line, talking about the genetic legacy and epigenetics and the lineage. Something happened which, in my deeper, and this gets really deep, dense hippie stuff, but it's like cyclic time and world ages and civilizational kind of disaster crises, astrophysics. There's a lot of evidence, if you pin it all together, that basically we go through traumatic upheavals over large geological phases of time, at least every 12,000 years or so. So civilization for me it's a post-traumatic response, that we've gone, something happened, and our consciousness, we came back up to here in the ego to survive and to cope.
This. We've got to try and control this nature. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah, so we can see this individually and collectively, and all the work we're doing on this individual level with clients, right? It's magnified on this collective level. But if you see the big picture, it helps put everything in perspective to know how to drill down and how to focus on what's really going on. Yeah.
Oh, that was such a transmission.
Every once in a while, otherwise talk a lot.
Pause and let people digest for a second. Wow. Yeah. And so, okay, so there's a lot there. And so for the person listening, like when they're in that egoic mind and in the kind of up here, up on the surface, what is something that you would recommend in the moment that we could do when we catch ourselves and become aware of ourselves in our egoic mind?
I think we're going to step back and define what the ego is, because we also get it confused. A lot of people have an immediate retraction and contraction because they think they're being criticized for being egotistical. And obviously in the world, we need to be driving our goals forward. And a lot of the work we're doing here is helping to identify who we are, what we're doing, and how to manifest it, how to make stuff happen, right? And I think that's crucial. And we need the ego. There's nothing wrong with an ego. What we're saying is
Totally.
the ego basically translates to your sense of identity or your id. When babies are born, they don't have an ego yet. It takes a few months, right? When babies are born, their brains are flooded with tryptamines, God bless them, and they're more
So
connected
sweet.
still. And they're in basically unity states or non-dual states, would say in more meditation kind of terminology. And it takes a while to tune into this frequency. And they come into this and they get into that groove. And then once that sets, the ego sets and it builds up and it has its pros and cons and gets affected and all the trauma and all the great things as well. But personality starts to shaping and then we drive forward. But what many people don't realize is it's permeable and it's changeable. And we get locked into rigid ego structures and we get locked into building up a lot of charge. As we go through life, good and bad things happen, but humans are the only animals which store traumatic events in our beings, right? In a more energetic, shamanic sense, we'd say we have an energetic body, we have an emotional body, we have this luminous light body, we have these gradations of our being, and emotionally, like stuff happens. And in nature, when animals are in dangerous situations and they survive flight and fear, they shake, they just start shaking and they tremor and they release and they move on with their day. They don't think back on the other things that much. Human beings don't do that as much. It's like we hold on to stuff and then we internalize, and then that energy that has been resulted from a traumatic incident, it can be internalized and it can result eventually in physical sickness, or it can result in personality shaping and contracting us and what we're doing and decisions we're making, how we interact with the world. It can also result in anxiety, depression, and build up. Often Western medical science, which is amazing, and I think it's had a lot of incredible breakthroughs to help support us. But also there's a whole big pharma agenda and there's a whole kind of control mechanism, which is reflective of the egoic control of society. But psychedelics as a potential healing mechanism has a lot of evidence and a lot of modern studies being done, peer-reviewed studies, organizations like MAPS, which have really worked for almost 40 years now to bring these medicines back into the medical model, have done a great lot of good. And what they're now finding in the psychedelic renaissance is psychedelics are getting commodified by the medical establishment and by the system as it is. But the ability of these substances to help in a guided, safe and sound container, maybe of a psychotherapeutic set and setting, is immeasurable. Right. And it does this by lowering the egoic mind and then releasing. And this is the bit where they haven't really caught up with the shamanic paradigm. It's not just that you take a psychedelic and it does the work for you. It can reveal your subconscious. It can reveal your patterning. And what then maybe not as clear on, but what I believe is also happening, as it lowers the egoic mind, it's like a cork comes off the bottle, and those old invisible energies which you've been holding and have been affecting you just can be released because the ego is not holding it in. There is one very strategic study done, I think it was by Johns Hopkins a while back, and they were looking at the mystical nature of, I think it was psilocybin and PTSD and depression and healing. And they said that the people that reported the greatest healing wasn't just from taking the substance, it was the ones who had the full ego dissolution, what they rated against the mystical questionnaire scale that was embedded back in the 60s in medical research. But it proved that it's in the release of the holding on that the healing can happen, because you're releasing the things that you're holding on to. And then you have a target window after a psychedelic experience where there's a bit of a neurogenesis and regrowing the brain cells and repatterning. You still have all your habits, but you've released a lot of these trapped energies. But you have an opportunity in that target window, which is where this coaching may come in, to enable you to make whatever changes are going to be strategic and valuable for you. So what I see, there's a lot of focus at the moment on the medical use of psychedelics in psychotherapy, but they haven't quite bundled that to an assembly line after therapy of the coaching. So there are quite a lot, and again, as I said, a lot of my friends, especially California, in America and the West Coast, there's a lot of life coaches, spiritual coaches, psychedelic sort of support and coaching, and they're separate and in this amorphous collective. But there's definitely a strategic sort of through line that's developing of what I like to look at as optimization. If you really, as of someone who's cares about improving yourself. And when you've dealt with your shadow, when you've been working on yourself with whatever modalities are working for you, and this can include meditation and breath work and coaching and self-realization, other acts of service, it may include psychedelics. It's got to be more than just one thing. We're not just pushing one paradigm or one thing. And specifically with psychedelics and substances that affect the mind, they're not for everyone, right? They're very powerful tools. All of these things are tools, but they can unpack a lot of stuff and really deeply restructure and let the guard down. But this is why you then need the therapy and the support, and then that long tail coaching, because you may not be ready for what it reveals. Okay, there's a lot of different capacities that we hold in realizing who we are, and we all serve different roles within our collective civilization and being here. But I think number one, and what we've been seeing for the last few years or generation, is the healing of the great wounds of Western civilization, which is the egoic separation from the head and the heart, and from the feeling of connection to the planet and to our place in the web of life, right? And so a lot of us have been doing that work. And then if you've done that work, what then? Well, stage two, which I think is where we're at right now, for those of us that have done that fundamental foundational work, is to then progress deeper into service of knowing yourself and to putting that into action in service of the collective. And using these substances to then optimize and to know what these energetic levels of being are and to connect to a bigger framework of reality, that's freaking exciting, right? To have a goal, to have a vision. We don't really have a collective societal vision anymore, right? Most people are surviving on the edge of the apocalypse, paying the rent. There's some Japanese word I see in some Facebook meme of the overlap. It's like the apocalypse 2024 and then paying the rent in the middle. It's, they're getting by, but bigger than that, there's not a vision of, I mean, there are visions out there, but there's not something that everyone believes in. So you've got to find that in yourself. This is the only shot you get until you come back next time. But let's focus on here and now.
Let's focus on this one. We're here now.
Live hard, live deep, live true, love deeply. And if we can help you discover how to do that and what's holding you back, that's what we're here for.
Amen. That's what we're here for. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. It's interesting, as you were talking, I was remembering like way back to my first NLP training, and how when we were taught about timeline therapy and healing around timeline, is that often key traumas happen in significant emotional events, right? So we have these significant emotional events. And I remember, I know Inside Out, the second Inside Out movie has just recently come out. I haven't seen it yet, but just that idea of how they represented it in that movie, of these like key lands that kind of become psyche forming, I guess, influences on your personality and your consciousness. And so what I'm hearing from you is that through these significant psychedelic experiences, because they are significant emotional experiences, we get to maybe release trapped emotions from those past events that we may or may not even consciously be aware of, that might be stuck in our bodies somewhere, and then start to recontextualize or make new meaning about those events to then give us the impetus or the freedom to be able to move forward in a new way and create new patterns. So I was like, oh, they're like significant. We're deliberately, through this set and setting of having these ceremonies, creating the conditions for a significant emotional event that is a positive, significant emotional event. And really hearing you on that piece of like, in the Western society, we killed all our shamans, we killed all our mystics, we killed all our witches and our herbalists, we killed all of the people that were representing this connection to nature and that were offering this healing to the community. So no bloody wonder we're having these mental health crises and anxiety and depression and all of these illnesses and identifications with problem states that are fundamentally a lack of connection to the heart and to the planet and to each other. So what great work that you're able to do to be able to curate these experiences of healing.
You know what I think though? It's almost like the second law of thermodynamics. It's like there's an equal and opposite reaction. You can't kill spirit.
You can't.
Spirit's life, right? Matter's just matter, but spirit is life. So if you try to extinguish in a culture the human spirit, it goes somewhere else. It just is redistributed, but it bounces back. And so
Yes.
I think what we're seeing now is that there's this increase in awareness and of people really
Mm.
choosing to define what spirituality means for them. And it's
Yeah.
not some esoteric sort of woo thing. It's
Yeah.
really a lot of science now. You could talk science and it sounds weird because it's what it's pointing to are these shifts in paradigm are the most amazing kind of ways to look at reality. It's
Yeah.
non-local, it's distributed, it's holographic, all space-time. It's trippy as, right? And that's
It's
just the
so trippy.
science, right? But what I'm getting at is, yeah, there's the people are hungry for authentic connection and they're starving
Mm.
for it. And modern culture isn't designed for it, really, because it's the legacy of the dominated culture that for the last 500 years killed off all our medicine people that helped us connect to the planet in this egoic disconnection to roll over and transform and build this hierarchical crest of civilization, which is creating the AI. So there's
Yeah.
something going on with it all, but coming back to feeling is what it's all
Yeah.
about. And that role of the shaman or that role of, even when we say coach, speaker, teacher, mystic, it's the role of the shaman in indigenous cultures was originally many things. It was priest. It was like traveler between the worlds. It was psychotherapist. It was mediator. Sometimes it was a village elder or leader. It was someone who was responsible for the health and well-being of their community. What a beautiful thing, right? And
Yes.
it doesn't, I don't think it's always been centralized in a person. I think that when we say in the role of psychopomp, or as from the Greek of someone who goes and is responsible for the soul's transition across the world and going into
Mm.
interdimensional kind of spaces, which do exist, that role
Mm.
is open for everyone. Everyone can
Mm.
be their own shamanaut, right? Going into inner space. We have this potential, and all the world's media is promoting psychedelics at the moment. The Michael
Yeah.
Pollan's famous book, How to Change Your Mind, came out in 2018, and then the Netflix show came out, directed by my friend Lucy Walker in America.
Yeah.
And all of Middle America and all of the world is realizing, all the moms and pops in Middle America, it's not only is it respectable to be doing psychedelics, it can help with healing,
It
and
can
everyone's
help.
switching off. And they're all looking for these experiences. But what we're finding
Mm.
is the legal psychedelic industry is still getting its feet around the world. Here in Australia, last July, almost a year ago, we legislated for the use of psilocybin and MDMA to be legal in the medical system in their psychotherapeutic settings in those containers. Again, and
Yeah.
this word containers is crucially important. A
Isn't it?
container might look like a doctor's office, or it might look like a festival, or it might look like an ayahuasca circle. But the
Mm.
idea is a safe and sound and sacred, I would say, container
Yeah.
is fundamental to the client or the person undergoing the experience to feel safe enough. And the reason you do this with trained professionals is that this is big work. And exactly as you said before, you want to be held in a
Yeah.
space where you can not have to worry about everything you're worrying about because you're held in that space that you need to focus on you and they're in service to you as well. I like to
Mm.
say that what I do is more closer to being a midwife or a doula in the
I love
empathy
that.
and in the presencing and holding that sacred space because I know what they're going through because I've been there too,
Yeah.
intimately, deeply. And it's as far as you can go as a human being and come back,
Yeah.
right? And the great gift and blessing of that is to know who and what you really are. But the idea
Mm.
you can't do that in a shaky container. And it doesn't necessarily all happen in one session or one set and setting. You have to
No.
work on the trauma story, unload that, or the patterning, and then, and this is the integration bit, and what would happen with the coaching bit is to really
Mm.
vision deeply. If nothing was holding you back, and you knew who and what you really are, and your purpose here, and if you could connect with the network of other revolutionary evolutionaries,
Yeah.
what could we do with
What
these
could we
moments,
do?
right? I say that one of my little slogans is from the emergency comes the emergence, right?
Oh, I
You know what
love that.
they're saying in the media at the moment, we're in this meta crisis. It's so big, they have to invent new terms for it. All the other, anyway, I won't go there, but it's like, we're in
Postmodern
something
meta
really big,
crisis.
guys. Yeah, I mean, these aren't the normal times, and
No.
we chose to be here, so they say, right? And regardless of what we believe, and regardless of all the polarity, consciousness,
Yes.
politics that's going on the planet, put all that to the side as an opportunity for growth and focus
Yes.
on this moment. We get one good shot, and I'm excited because in my old superhero comics from the 1970s and all the old traditions, what I realized is in the 1940s, Batman and Robin and Superman. Before the superhero was the mystery man, no superpowers. But the thing is, they responded, they were created by the collective kind of intention because of a need in the collective, like
There's a
this need for a
need.
medicine person or a mystic or a thing. We killed all ours, right? And in the absence of that archetype, nature abhors a vacuum. It bounces back stronger and it comes back eventually, right? And
Yeah.
in this instance, what I'm saying is that there's a need which is filled always. And so
Yes.
this ability for us to optimize into our greatest potential and network together, right? You got to go to my website. I know this is so much dense information. There's so
I
much stuff
love
here.
it. I love
I'll
it.
just crack in another. I've always said, Carly Ryan, look, you're going to help me with this. The money's in the merch. And I've always said, like, bumper stickers, t-shirts, coffee mugs, because here's another one of my slogans. I remember, and I'm like, why not am I making merch with this? Someone please help me set up this Redbubble account.
Let's
Um,
sort
I,
this
I
out.
call it I call it a samadhi mesh network. And I know it's a very densely embedded term, but if you check out my site, there's a lot of stuff which defines all of this. Samadhi is a single point focus of consciousness in yogic thought, but essentially it's like you are the universe in this point. The mesh network in computing is like when the more people that join the network, the stronger it gets. It's not centralized. So what I wonder, beyond the trauma story of all our work on ourselves across all these modalities, as we become optimized in ourselves and we know ourselves and we start to recognize each other, what can we do with there is the emergence from the emergency? And that really excites me about these times because
Me too.
it's really going down and we're really going in with this, right?
Yeah.
That's what I believe.
I'm like right there with right there with you, my friend. Is let's journey, let's like mesh network. And it's so wild. Like when I think about manifestation and just the idea that the Hermetic principle, as above, so below, like the internet itself is the ultimate mesh network of consciousness, that like it's a manifestation of us being able to connect instantaneously with anyone anywhere on the world based on the frequency of our consciousness. What are we actually thinking about? What are we talking about? What are we interested in? What are we connecting around? And so, of course, you can connect around all sorts of horrible things, or you could connect around suffering, or you could connect around consciousness or money making or whatever. Choose your own adventure. And so there is this incredible opportunity now that has never existed before for us to
Mm.
network with each other based on consciousness. And so I'm like super excited. We get to meet all of our fellow allies and colleagues and fellow mystics and people that maybe we worked together with in past lives. Now we get to connect and collaborate all across the world. That's exciting. I'm like, okay, you guys, activate. Let's connect and collaborate. What can we do together? The time is now. So I get really excited about it, as you can tell.
I love it. One of the
I'm
twin
here for it.
powers. Activate. Yeah. No, but honestly,
Captain Planet.
it's kind of what we're saying is we make magic. Everyone has magic in them, and it's time for mega magic, right?
It's
And it's just
really
feeling and
time.
responding to the needs of that's what I'm trying to say. It's like when it's time for automobiles come, when it's time for telephones, telephone comes, when it's time for
Yes.
somebody makes networks come. And people say, where do ideas come from? I believe consciousness is transmitted, and this is not, I'm not alone in this. This is pretty much what everyone's is going. It's not, it's
Yes.
decentralized. It's something which is transmitted and we're tuning in. And so there's times and tides of consciousness and of evolution down here on Earth. And we're at this transition point as a species where we either go post-terrestrial and follow Elon off planet and go to Mars and devour that and through the solar system, or we also go in, right? And if we unite with the heart, my thing is, as a species and as human beings, unless we really know ourselves, if we're just working from the wounded ego consciousness, which wants more,
Yeah.
it can't get enough ever,
It's a
because what it really
locust.
wants is connection. What it wants is connection from the heart.
Mm.
And if you're connected, you're going to choose differently how you see the world.
Mm.
And we're at this point of history is always being formed, but we're at this real inflection point where what we do in the months and years ahead are going to shape our lives
Yes.
and our destiny as a species forever. So I don't know.
It's
I think it's really,
important,
really out
yo.
there. Yeah, yeah.
What we do matters now. And so for like this is I get really excited by it. I feel this like huge uprising of it's time, it's time. And so for someone who also feels that call and is just chomping at the bit and soaking up every word that you're saying and is just getting super activated by it, just really excited by this and doesn't maybe is in a scenario where their family or friends or their kind of current community doesn't quite get that or isn't quite on the same trip, what would be your mentorship for someone like that?
I guess it depends on the kind of specifics, but if people are interested in psychedelic journey work, I think that
Yeah,
is a big step. We're in
huge.
this kind of zeitgeist at the moment where everything's permissible almost. You can be anything and anyone you want to be, and it's all up for grabs. And so I think what most people are finding is that the public discourse and all the efficacy and the studies are saying that psychedelics are permissible again. Right? Everyone from the
Yeah,
Pentagon down is saying they're okay. But so then this becomes a question of, is it right for you? And we're not saying you have to do psychedelics, but you might be into breath work or you might be into family constellations or understanding different
yeah,
aspects about yourself.
yeah,
What we're really inviting people to do is to know themselves and to step into that power of being
yeah,
empowered, right? And figuring out where they're at. And so psychedelics are a huge step. I mean, they can destabilize in some cases if
mm,
you're not ready for them, but they can also greatly allow you to know yourself deeply. So if you choose that, the next step would be to find a safe and ethical practitioner to do that
yes,
with. I mean, there's a hierarchy there, and there's been some feedback, criticism. There's always a fringe which saying, look, people can DIY psychonautics, sure, but that's not for everyone, and there are risks involved with that.
there are
I
definitely
mean,
risks.
a lot of the time in the last few generations, the criticism of psychedelics before they've become destigmatized again has been that they're recreational or that it's escapism. And I think I can't even, I'm just, look, I'm going to go to that whole comment because it's like
Uh,
this modern world is all escapism. It's completely different times, right?
oh,
But
excuse me
what
while I
we're saying,
scroll on my phone and buy a bunch of things and eat
I
some more,
know. I
see
mean,
some more
we're
stuff.
rewarded. We're encouraged to escape, to not look at the severity of the meta crisis. So these substances, when utilized in the right way, are a tool for you to know yourself, and it goes very deep. The reality it can unveil that we're connected in an energetic ecology to deeper realms of being that all our ancestors believed in. And all the indigenous cultures still say is there. All the hippies say it. But one of the problems is when a lot of the a lot of the a lot of the languaging or a lot of the mapping of the terra incognita, the invisible landscape of the inner dimensionality, it's hard to languagize in ways that our culture can understand because it's promoted a language of efficient, ruthless kind of 9 to 5 corporatism nowadays. If it doesn't
Scientism,
fit
yeah.
the agenda, and we've had 500 years of exercising the people and the connection to these realms, we've almost invisibilized the capacity to describe it. So when a lot of people say it's all love, man, it's all connected, it's all one big thing. It's like people just be critical, but it's
It's
to
the
come back to
truth.
that though. It's not recreational, it's exploratory, right? And
Mm,
sometimes in recreational, it's self-medicating, that people are doing what they
definitely
need
did
to
that.
do. And to differentiate the psychedelics from the narcotics and from the
Yeah.
opioids and other things, and they have
Yeah.
places in their own paradigms, I guess, too. But what we're saying is people have a right. They have a right to choose their own consciousness. There was a declaration of consciousness that I think Timothy Leary devised back in the 60s based on the founding fathers of America's Declaration of Independence. But, in
Yes.
their kind of Declaration of Independence is the right to choose their own sovereignty. And governments have been encroaching on these rights for a very long
A
time.
long
But
time.
we have a sovereign right to know ourselves of who and what we are. And if you are going to step into your self-knowing with these type of substances, and it's good to have a facilitator that knows what they're
Experienced.
doing. and has been there before you and can maybe even work in this setting of people that maybe there's healing, maybe there's trauma, maybe there's optimization and getting to know yourself and your being,
Yeah.
maybe there's goal setting, and there's that long tail integration coaching that helps you reach those goals and transform your entire life, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe it won't be the goals you set out with when you get to that end stage. Maybe you won't be a better
Indeed.
CEO, quit the company and you save a rainforest, or you live with an indigenous community in the woods, and
Yeah.
you be,
And
and
yeah.
that your vibration happiness is felt in your family and your friends, and it radiates through the world. And if we all find our happiness, that's the whole point of being here. So all
Right.
I'm saying is that's out of the bag. There's risks, there's pros and cons, and there's great gifts from knowing yourself and from working with trained people that hold safe and sacred containers to support you in that awakening.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Now, for
Absolutely.
really, I don't have the special upsell, my free ebook gift and my training course that I could then now. That's why I said at the start, I'm like the anti-coach. I'm like the actual teacher, speaker, mystic. I do
So
have a lot
fine.
of things on my website, rakrazam.com. You can get my books, 2 books on
Yes.
ayahuasca films, one ayahuasca film, 2 Shamans of the Global Village films. There are a few ebooks. If you sign up on my website, you get a free ebook on consciousness and the deeper purpose of psychedelics, which is a snapshot overview of a lot of stuff we've talked about today. And if you are looking to connect with me, you can find me somehow. It'll be
You'll
worth
find
it.
me somewhere. There's not that many people called Rak Roller Skate Razam.
I hope
Only
not.
one. Only one. Oh, Rak, thank you. Thank you for sharing your heart and your wisdom and your enthusiasm with us. And to be able to encapsulate it in this little moment is just such a treasure, because it can absolutely advocate, vindicate, edify your mastery in this realm. And it has been it's been life-changing. I've had many ceremonies with you, and it's been absolutely incredible and literally awe-inspiring. And so to be able to learn from you and journey with you has been, yeah, it's
Thank
such a
you.
joy. Yeah, it's such a joy. So thank you. Thank you. It's been so great. And just to share you with a few more people in the world is just an absolute joy. So thank you for your time.
I want to say thank you for that opportunity to speak with you and I guess your network. But then, I looked at your website because we've known each other for quite a while. I'm like, oh, look at the cool stuff that you do. And just to realize as well, such deep modalities in, I guess, your skill base, but also in this profession, right? And the bleed through into all these other kind of professions, and how all of them just empower you to give you more capacity to be in service. And so kudos to you and all that you do. I think it's wonderful and just, yeah, beautiful.
Thanks, Rak. Appreciate you. I'll catch you in the next now, hey?
All right. Good. Aloha.
Aloha.